The wheelchair hit the curb so hard I thought my teeth would rattle loose. My son Michael didn't even slow down as he pushed me toward the Delta terminal, muttering under his breath about missing his flight to Cabo. "Mom, you're going to have to figure this out yourself," he said, parking me next to a trash bin like I was luggage he couldn't wait to check. "Sarah and I already missed our connection because of your doctor's appointment running late." The smell of jet fuel and stale coffee filled my nostrils as travelers rushed past, their rolling suitcases clicking against the linoleum. Nobody looked at the 82-year-old woman in the wheelchair. Nobody ever did anymore. "But Michael, how am I supposed to?" "Figure it out, Mom." He was already walking away, his designer sneakers squeaking against the floor. "Your flight to Tampa isn't until tomorrow morning. There's got to be hotels around here or something." My daughter Sarah appeared beside him, her phone pressed to her ear, nodding at whatever he'd just said. She gave me a little wave without making eye contact, the kind you'd give a stranger. And then they were gone. The terminal buzzed around me like I was invisible. Business travelers in their sharp suits. Families with sticky-fingered children. Young couples holding hands and laughing about nothing. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that harsh airport glow that makes everyone look sick. I sat there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, watching people disappear into security lines and emerge from baggage claim into the arms of people who'd actually come to pick them up. What was I supposed to do now? Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. The first person to notice me was a janitor named Carlos. He had kind eyes and spoke with an accent that reminded me of the neighborhood I'd grown up in back in Queens. "Senora, you okay?" he asked, pausing with his mop bucket. "You've been sitting here a while." I tried to smile but felt my lips trembling. "My children, they had to catch a flight. I'm not sure what to do." Carlos frowned, glancing around the terminal. "You got someone coming to get you?" The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. Someone coming to get me. When was the last time anyone had come to get me anywhere? When was the last time anyone had wanted to? "No," I whispered. "No, I don't think I do." He studied my face for a moment, then did something that surprised me. He pulled out his radio and spoke quickly in Spanish. I caught a few words: elderly, alone, help. Within minutes, a woman in a crisp Delta uniform appeared. She was maybe 50 with short gray hair and eyes that actually saw me when she looked down. "Mrs. Hargrave," I managed. "Eunice Hargrave." "Mrs. Hargrave, I'm Janet Morrison, Delta's customer service supervisor. Carlos here says you might need some assistance." The kindness in her voice almost broke me. I hadn't heard genuine concern from another human being in months. Maybe longer. "My children." I started then stopped. How do you explain to a stranger that your own children had abandoned you at an airport? How do you admit that the people who were supposed to love you most had left you sitting next to a trash can like something they wanted to throw away? "They had an emergency," I lied. "I'm supposed to fly to Tampa tomorrow morning, but..." Janet knelt down so we were at eye level. "But you don't have anywhere to go tonight." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Let me see what I can do," she said, pulling out her phone. "Carlos, thank you for calling this in. Can you stay with Mrs. Hargrave for a moment?" As Janet walked a few feet away to make her call, I watched her animated conversation. Her eyebrows kept rising higher and higher, and she kept glancing back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Surprise. That's what it was. She looked surprised. Carlos leaned on his mop handle. "That Janet, she's good people. She'll take care of you." I wanted to believe him, but I'd learned not to trust in people taking care of me. People left. People disappeared. People forgot you existed the moment you became inconvenient. The terminal started to thin out as evening flights departed. The restaurants began closing their metal gates with sharp clanks that echoed through the concourse. Soon it would just be the red-eye flights and the cleaning crews and me sitting here in this wheelchair waiting for morning. Janet returned, her expression even more puzzled than before. "Mrs. Hargrave, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." My heart started racing. Had my children reported their credit cards stolen? Were they trying to say I'd kidnapped myself or something equally ridiculous? "What is it? Have you ever invested in Delta Airlines stock?" The question caught me completely off guard. What? Stock? In the company? Did you ever buy shares in Delta? I blinked at her, confusion clouding my thoughts. Well, yes, actually. Back in the 70s and 80s. My late husband Harold and we bought stock in several airlines. Pan Am, TWA, Delta. Harold always said people would always need to fly places. Janet's eyes widened. How much stock, Mrs. Hargrave? Oh, I don't know. Harold handled all that. Quite a bit, I suppose. We bought more whenever we had extra money. Harold said Delta was going to be big someday. I laughed bitterly. Not that it matters now. I don't even know what happened to those old certificates. Probably worthless paper in a box somewhere. Janet stared at me for a long moment, then pulled out her phone again. This time her conversation was urgent, full of numbers and dates and questions I couldn't follow. When she hung up, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. Mrs. Hargrave, I need to make a few more calls. In the meantime, I'm going to have someone from our VIP services come down and get you settled in our Sky Club. There's food, comfortable seating, showers if you need them. Oh, I couldn't. I don't have that kind of membership and I can't afford. It's on the house tonight, Janet said firmly. Consider it our pleasure. 20 minutes later, I found myself in a world I'd never seen before. The Sky Club was like stepping into a different universe from the main terminal. Soft lighting instead of harsh fluorescence. Comfortable leather chairs instead of plastic seats. The smell of fresh coffee and warm bread instead of industrial disinfectant. A young man named David brought me a plate of food, real food, not airport concession stand garbage. Grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, a dinner roll that was actually warm and soft. Is there anything else I can get you, Mrs. Hargrave? He asked. I looked around the quiet lounge at the other travelers reading newspapers and typing on laptops, at the view of planes taking off into the darkening sky. Why are you doing this? I asked. I mean, this is very kind, but I'm nobody special. I'm just an old woman whose children forgot about her. David smiled. Janet asked us to take extra special care of you tonight. She said you're VIP. When was the last time anyone had called me important? When was the last time anyone had treated me like I mattered? I ate my dinner slowly, savoring each bite. Outside the windows, planes continued their endless dance of departures and arrivals. People going places. People being met by loved ones. People with somewhere to belong. Maybe Harold had been right about Delta after all. Around 10 o'clock, Janet returned. She looked like she'd been running around the airport all evening, her usually neat hair slightly mussed, her cheeks flushed. Mrs. Hargrave, I'm sorry to bother you so late, but I have some questions about your stock holdings. I told you I don't really know anything about that. Harold handled all the finances. I understand. But I've been on the phone with our legal department, and they found some very interesting records in our archives. She sat down across from me, pulling out a folder thick with papers. According to our records, you and your late husband purchased Delta stock consistently from 1978 to 1991. A lot of stock. I shrugged. Like I said, whenever we had extra money. Harold was convinced airlines were the future. Mrs. Hargrave, do you understand what happened to that stock over the years? I assume it's worthless now. Everything else Harold invested in seemed to disappear after he died. Janet leaned forward. It didn't disappear. It split. Multiple times. What you originally bought has multiplied over and over again for the past 40 years. My head started spinning. I don't understand what that means. It means, Janet said carefully, that you're one of Delta's largest individual shareholders. You own approximately 2.3 million shares of Delta Airlines stock. The words didn't make sense. They bounced around in my head like marbles in a jar. That's impossible. I've triple-checked the records. Your name is right here, listed as beneficial owner. The dividend checks should have been coming to you automatically. Dividend checks. I thought about all the mail I'd stopped opening after Harold died. All the official-looking envelopes I'd assumed were bills or scams and had thrown away. All the letters I'd been too tired and too sad to deal with. I never. I stammered. Mrs. Hargrave, at today's closing price, your shares are worth approximately $430 million. The room tilted. The soft jazz music playing overhead seemed to get louder and then fade away entirely. The comfortable leather chair felt like it was spinning beneath me. $430 million. I thought about Michael pushing my wheelchair to the curb and walking away. I thought about Sarah giving me that dismissive little wave. I thought about sitting next to that trash can, invisible and forgotten. I thought about all the times they'd rolled their eyes when I'd needed help with something. All the times they'd made me feel like a burden. All the comments about nursing homes and making arrangements for me. That can't be right, I whispered. But Janet was nodding, her expression serious and somehow apologetic. Right. And Mrs. Hargrave, there's something else. She pulled out another document, this one with the Delta logo at the top. As one of our founding investors and largest shareholders, you're entitled to certain privileges. The document was titled Lifetime Diamond Medallion Status and Complimentary First-Class Travel Benefits. This means, Janet explained, that you can fly first class on any Delta flight, anywhere in the world for the rest of your life. No charge. Ever. I stared at the paper in my hands. The words blurred together as my eyes filled with tears. Somewhere in the distance I heard my phone buzzing. A text message. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands. The message was from Michael. Mom, hope you found a hotel okay. Sarah and I are having dinner at this amazing place in Cabo. Wish you were here. Not really, Elle. See you when we get back. There was a photo attached. Michael and Sarah at some beachside restaurant, drinks in hand, grinning at the camera. They looked so happy. So free. So relieved to be rid of me. I looked up at Janet, who was watching me with those kind, knowing eyes. Mrs. Hargrave? Are you all right? Was I all right? My children had abandoned me at an airport, expecting me to figure out my own way home like some kind of stray animal they couldn't be bothered to care for anymore. But I wasn't homeless. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't the pathetic old woman they thought I was. I was worth $430 million. And I was about to become very, very interesting to a lot of people. But first I had a phone call to make. Actually, I had several phone calls to make. Janet, I said, my voice steadier than it had been all day, I think I'm going to need to extend my stay here a little longer. She smiled. Of course, Mrs. Hargrave. Would you like me to arrange a suite at the airport hotel? First class, naturally. I thought about Michael's text message. I thought about that photo of them celebrating their freedom from their burdensome mother. Actually, I said, I think I'd like to fly somewhere tonight. If that's possible. Anywhere you'd like. Where were you thinking? I looked out the window at the planes taking off into the night sky, carrying people to destinations all over the world. People who had places to go and people waiting for them when they arrived. For the first time in years I had both. Cabo, I said. I think I'd like to go to Cabo. Janet's smile grew wider. I'll make the arrangements right away. As she walked away to organize my flight, I pulled out my phone again. I had some text messages to send. The first one went to Michael. Thank you for leaving me at the airport tonight. You have no idea what a favor you've just done me. The second went to Sarah. Enjoy your vacation. We need to talk when you get back. Then I turned off my phone and settled back into my comfortable chair to wait for my first-class flight to paradise. Tomorrow everything was going to change. Tonight I was finally going home. But as I sat there in the quiet luxury of the Sky Club, watching Janet make animated phone calls across the lounge, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else she wasn't telling me. Something important. Something that was going to change everything even more than I already knew. And then I saw him walking toward me across the lounge. A man in an expensive suit with silver hair and eyes that seemed to recognize me, even though I was certain I'd never seen him before in my life. Mrs. Eunice Hargrave? He said, extending his hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Yes. My name is Richard Smith. I represent certain interests that have been looking for you for a very long time. Richard Smith sat down without being invited, his expensive suit rustling as he settled into the leather chair across from me. Up close I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the kind that came from years of squinting at legal documents and balance sheets. Mrs. Hargrave, what I'm about to tell you might come as quite a shock. I laughed, surprising myself. Mr. Smith, I just discovered I'm worth $400 million after my children abandoned me at an airport. I'm not sure anything could shock me more than that. His smile was thin, calculated. Oh, I think this might. He opened a leather briefcase and pulled out a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. The tab read, Hargrave Estate Confidential. Mrs. Hargrave, your late husband Harold didn't just invest in Delta Airlines. My stomach lurched. What do you mean? Harold Hargrave was what we call a ghost investor. Between 1975 and 1992, he purchased significant holdings in 17 different companies under various shell corporations and trust arrangements. The words swirled around me like smoke. Shell corporations? Harold worked at the post office. He delivered mail. During the day, yes. But your husband had quite the side business. He was remarkably gifted at identifying undervalued companies just before they exploded into household names. Richard pulled out a sheet of paper covered in company logos I recognized. Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook. This is impossible, I whispered. Harold purchased 1,000 shares of Apple stock in 1980 for $22 per share. Do you know what those shares are worth today after multiple splits? I shook my head, afraid to hear the answer. Approximately $47 million. The Sky Club suddenly felt too small, too warm. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears like thunder. The Microsoft investment from 1986 is worth roughly $62 million. The Amazon shares from 1995, another $38 million. Richard's voice was steady, professional, like he was reading stock prices instead of destroying my entire understanding of my own life. Stop, I said. Just stop. But he didn't stop. Mrs. Hargrave, your total portfolio, including assets your husband placed in various trusts and holding companies, is valued at approximately $1.2 billion. $1.2 billion. The number was too big to fit in my head. It ricocheted around my skull like a pinball, bouncing off memories of Harold kissing me goodbye every morning in his postal uniform, coming home tired and smelling like the mail truck, falling asleep in his recliner watching the evening news. Why are you telling me this? I managed. Because, Mrs. Hargrave, there are people who have been trying to locate these assets for years. People who stand to inherit quite a lot of money if you were to disappear. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. What kind of people? Richard's expression grew grave. Your children, for starters. Michael's face flashed in my mind. The way he'd pushed my wheelchair like he was in a hurry to get rid of evidence. The way Sarah had avoided eye contact. The way they'd both walked away without a backward glance. That's ridiculous. My children don't know anything about this. Don't they? Richard pulled out another document. This is a copy of a legal petition filed by Michael and Sarah Hargrave 6 months ago. They're seeking to have you declared mentally incompetent so they can gain control of your finances. The paper felt like ice in my hands. There were my children's names right at the top. Their signatures at the bottom. Petitioners assert that Eunice Hargrave, age 82, suffers from severe dementia and is incapable of managing her financial affairs. I stopped reading. The words blurred together as tears filled my eyes. They think I have dementia. They want you to have dementia, Richard corrected. It's much easier to transfer assets from someone who's been legally declared incompetent. Janet appeared at my elbow looking concerned. Mrs. Hargrave, is everything all right? Your first-class seat to Cabo is confirmed for the 11:30 flight, but you look. Cancel it, I said quietly. I'm sorry. Cancel the flight to Cabo. I looked up at Richard Smith with his expensive suit and his manila folder full of secrets. I think I need to stay here and figure some things out. Richard nodded approvingly. Very wise. Janet hesitated. Are you sure? I can always rebook you for tomorrow if you change your mind. I'm sure. After Janet left, Richard leaned forward in his chair. Mrs. Hargrave, there's something else. The reason I've been looking for you. Of course there was. There was always something else. Harold didn't just invest in stocks. 3 months before he died, he made one final purchase that even I didn't know about until recently. He pulled out a photograph of a building I didn't recognize. Modern glass and steel reaching up into a blue sky. This is the Meridian Tower in downtown Manhattan. 47 floors of prime real estate. Your husband bought it through a holding company called H&E Investments. H&E, I repeated. Harold and Eunice. Exactly. The building is currently valued at $680 million. The rental income alone generates about $35 million per year. I stared at the photograph. Somewhere in that gleaming tower, people were working, living their lives, completely unaware that their building was owned by an old woman in a wheelchair who'd been abandoned at JFK Airport. Why didn't I know about any of this? Harold set everything up to activate only after certain conditions were met. Your age, your financial need, or... Richard paused. Or what? Or if anyone tried to have you declared incompetent. The pieces started clicking together in my mind like tumblers in a lock. Harold had known. Somehow my sweet, quiet husband who delivered mail and fell asleep watching TV had known this day might come. He was protecting me. Harold left very specific instructions. If anyone ever challenged your mental capacity or tried to take control of your assets, all the hidden investments would automatically transfer into your name. Full control, no restrictions. My phone buzzed against my leg. Another text message. This time it was from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Hargrave, this is Dr. Patricia Wells from Shady Oaks Memory Care Facility. Your son Michael asked me to contact you about scheduling an evaluation. Please call at your earliest convenience. Memory Care Facility. They'd already started. Richard saw my face change. What is it? I showed him the text. He read it, his expression darkening. They're moving faster than I expected. What do you mean? Mrs. Hargrave, I need to ask you something, and please think very carefully before you answer. Have you been experiencing any memory problems? Any confusion, difficulty concentrating? I thought about the past few months. The times I'd forgotten appointments. The difficulty balancing my checkbook. The way simple tasks seem to take so much more effort than they used to. I admitted. But I thought that was normal. I'm 82 years old. Have Michael or Sarah been encouraging you to see doctors? Suggesting you might need help with daily activities? They had. Over and over again. Always framed as concern, as love, as wanting what was best for me. They said they were worried about me living alone. I'm sure they were. Richard's voice was dry as sand. Worried you might live too long. The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. My own children. The babies I'd nursed, the toddlers I'd chased around playgrounds, the teenagers I'd waited up for on prom night. They'd been planning to have me declared mentally defective so they could steal money they didn't even know existed. Money their father had spent 40 years accumulating for me. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Michael. Mom, got a weird call from Delta about some stock thing? Are you okay? Call me ASAP. So word was getting out. Janet had probably had to make inquiries with the legal department and someone had talked to someone else and now the whispers were starting. I showed the text to Richard. That was fast, he said. Mrs. Hargrave, I need to be very clear about something. Once your children discover the extent of your wealth, they're going to move aggressively. The incompetency hearing is probably already scheduled. What can I do? Fight back. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. I'm 82 years old. I'm in a wheelchair. I don't know the first thing about legal battles or financial corporations. But you're not incompetent. And you're definitely not poor. Richard smiled for the first time since he'd sat down, and this time it reached his eyes. Mrs. Hargrave, you have resources they can't even imagine. The question is, what do you want to do with them? I thought about Michael pushing my wheelchair like I was luggage. I thought about Sarah's dismissive wave. I thought about them laughing on that beach in Cabo, celebrating their freedom from their burdensome mother. I thought about that text from the memory care facility. And I thought about Harold, my quiet, clever husband, setting up a safety net for me that had taken 40 years to fully deploy. I want to show them exactly who they're dealing with, I said. Richard's smile grew wider. Now you're talking. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Yes, it's Richard. I found her. Yes, she's competent and she's angry. We're going to need the full team. While he talked, I looked around the Sky Club at all the comfortable travelers, none of whom had any idea they were sitting next to one of the richest women in America. None of whom knew that the old lady in the wheelchair had just declared war on her own children. When Richard hung up, he was all business again. I've got lawyers flying in from 3 different cities. By morning we'll have a full legal team assembled. But Mrs. Hargrave, I need you to understand. This is going to get ugly. Your children won't go down without a fight. Good, I said, surprising myself with the venom in my voice. Neither will I. My phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. Richard raised an eyebrow. Are you going to answer? I stared at the phone for a moment, thinking about all the times I'd jumped to answer when my children called. All the times I'd dropped everything to help them, to be available for them, to make their lives easier. All the times they'd made me feel grateful for whatever scraps of attention they threw my way. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. This time I answered. Hello, Michael. Mom, what the hell is going on? I just got 3 phone calls about you owning stock in Delta? And someone from their legal department wants to schedule a meeting. Is that so? Mom, are you okay? You sound strange. Strange. Not different. Not stronger. Strange. I'm fine, dear. Better than fine, actually. Look, I think there's been some kind of mistake. You don't own stock in anything. Dad never mentioned any investments. Didn't he? There was a pause. When Michael spoke again, his voice had that careful, patronizing tone I knew so well. The voice you use with someone you think isn't quite tracking the conversation. Mom, I think maybe you're confused. Why don't Sarah and I fly back tomorrow and we can sort this out together? Maybe Dr. Wells could meet with us too. Dr. Wells from the memory care facility. They really had already set everything up. That won't be necessary, Michael. Mom, I really think. Michael, do you remember when you were 7 years old and you broke Mrs. Patterson's window with a baseball? What? Mom, that was 40 years ago. Why are you? You came running home crying, convinced you were going to jail. And what did I do? Silence. I marched over to Mrs. Patterson's house and I paid for that window out of my grocery money. And I stood between you and the consequences of your actions because that's what mothers do. Mom, I don't understand what this has to do with. I've spent my whole life standing between you and the consequences of your actions, Michael. But not anymore. I hung up. The phone immediately started ringing again. I turned it off. Richard was watching me with something that looked like respect. Feel better? Actually, yes. Good. Because tomorrow we start showing your children what consequences look like. As if on cue, Janet appeared again, this time with a man in a dark suit who looked like he'd stepped out of a boardroom. Mrs. Hargrave, this is James Mitchell, our Vice President of Customer Relations. He wanted to meet with you personally. James Mitchell shook my hand with the kind of firm grip reserved for very important people. Mrs. Hargrave, it's an honor. When we discovered you were one of our founding investors, well, I had to come down and thank you personally. Just doing my part, I said. Ma'am, I hope you don't mind, but we've taken the liberty of upgrading your accommodations tonight. The presidential suite at the Grand Hyatt is waiting for you, and tomorrow we'd love to give you a behind-the-scenes tour of our operations. I looked at Richard, who nodded slightly. That sounds lovely, I said. As James and Janet escorted me toward the exit, Richard walked beside my wheelchair. Mrs. Hargrave, there's one more thing I should mention. What's that? Your husband's final instructions included a provision that if anyone ever tried to challenge your competency, you should take immediate steps to, how did he put it? Show them what real power looks like. And how exactly did Harold suggest I do that? Richard's smile was absolutely wicked. Well, let's just say your children aren't the only ones who can file legal papers. As we left the Sky Club behind, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt dangerous. And tomorrow Michael and Sarah were going to find out exactly how dangerous their burdensome old mother could be. But as we reached the elevator, Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression changed completely. Mrs. Hargrave, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Your children just filed an emergency motion for guardianship. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. The elevator doors opened, and as we stepped inside, I realized the real battle was about to begin. And I still had no idea if I was strong enough to win it. The presidential suite at the Grand Hyatt was bigger than the apartment I'd shared with Harold for 30 years. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city lights, and the bed was so enormous I could have gotten lost in it. But I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in the leather chair by the window, watching planes take off from JFK in the distance, thinking about tomorrow's hearing and the team of lawyers Richard had assembled in the conference room down the hall. At 6 a.m, room service arrived with coffee and pastries I didn't want. At 7, Richard knocked on my door with a garment bag. Court-appropriate attire, he explained. We need you to look like the powerful woman you are, not the victim they're trying to paint. The navy blue suit fit perfectly. Professional, expensive, commanding. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. At 8:30, we arrived at the courthouse in a black town car. Michael and Sarah were already there, standing on the steps with their own lawyer, a thin man with nervous eyes who kept checking his watch. Michael saw me first. His mouth actually fell open. Mom? What are you wearing? And who are all these people? Behind me stood Richard and 3 other lawyers, all carrying briefcases and wearing expressions that could cut glass. Hello, Michael. Sarah. I nodded to my daughter, who looked like she'd seen a ghost. Lovely morning, isn't it? Mom, what's going on? Sarah's voice was higher than usual. We're just trying to help you. This is Dr. Wells. She's here to evaluate. Dr. Wells won't be necessary, Richard interrupted smoothly. Mrs. Hargrave has undergone extensive cognitive testing by her own medical team. The results are quite conclusive. He handed Sarah a folder. Your mother is in perfect mental health. Michael grabbed the folder and flipped through it frantically. This is impossible. She's been forgetting things, getting confused. Grief, I said simply. I was grieving your father. And apparently grieving the children I thought I had. Their lawyer stepped forward, trying to regain control. Your Honor will see that Mrs. Hargrave has been making erratic financial decisions, living beyond her means. Living beyond her means? Richard laughed, a sound like ice cracking. Gentlemen, shall we go inside? I think you're going to find this hearing quite educational. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, smelling of old books and broken promises. Judge Harrison was a woman about my age with steel-gray hair and no-nonsense eyes. This is an emergency hearing regarding the competency of Eunice Margaret Hargrave, she began. Mr. Peterson, you represent the petitioners? Michael and Sarah's lawyer stood up, his Adam's apple bobbing. Yes, Your Honor. We seek guardianship of Mrs. Hargrave due to her diminished mental capacity and inability to manage her financial affairs. And you are? Judge Harrison looked at Richard. Richard Blackwood, representing Mrs. Hargrave. We oppose this petition in the strongest possible terms. Judge Harrison looked at me. Mrs. Hargrave, do you understand what's happening here today? I stood up slowly, using my cane for support but not leaning on it. Yes, Your Honor. My children are trying to have me declared mentally incompetent so they can control my finances. And do you feel you're competent to manage your own affairs? I smiled. I believe the evidence will speak for itself. Michael's lawyer presented his case first. A parade of small incidents. The time I'd forgotten a doctor's appointment, the difficulty I'd had with online banking, my supposed confusion about bills and finances. Mrs. Hargrave is clearly struggling with basic daily activities, he concluded. Her children are simply trying to protect her from herself. Judge Harrison looked skeptical. Mrs. Hargrave appears quite articulate to me, Mr. Peterson. Dementia can be intermittent, Your Honor. Patients often have periods of clarity between episodes of confusion. When it was Richard's turn, he didn't start with my medical records or cognitive tests. He started with a projector. The first slide showed the Delta stock certificates from 1978. Mrs. Hargrave's investment history demonstrates 40 years of sound financial judgment. The second slide showed the current value. Michael made a choking sound. The third slide showed the Apple stock. Sarah grabbed her brother's arm. By the time Richard reached slide 15, the Meridian Tower, both my children looked like they were going to be sick. Your Honor, Richard said calmly, Mrs. Eunice Hargrave is worth approximately $1.2 billion. Far from being financially incompetent, she's one of the most successful investors of her generation. Judge Harrison stared at the screen. 1.2 billion? That's correct. Mrs. Hargrave, would you like to tell the court how you've been managing these assets? I stood again, feeling steadier now. Your Honor, until yesterday I had no idea these investments existed. My husband Harold managed our finances, and when he died I assumed we had very little. I've been living on Social Security and a small pension, trying not to be a burden on anyone. I looked directly at Michael and Sarah. Trying not to be a burden on my children, who apparently couldn't wait to get rid of that burden permanently. Mrs. Hargrave, Judge Harrison said gently, if you didn't know about these assets, how were they being managed? Harold set up a trust system that would activate under certain conditions. If I reached age 85, if I faced financial hardship, or... I paused, looking at my children again. If anyone tried to have me declared incompetent. The courtroom was dead silent. Richard stepped forward. Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence that this petition was filed not out of concern for Mrs. Hargrave's welfare, but as part of a calculated attempt to gain control of assets the petitioners believed she possessed. He handed the judge a stack of documents. Phone records showing conversations between Michael and Sarah Hargrave discussing their mother's hidden money. Email exchanges with Dr. Wells about the fastest way to get Mrs. Hargrave committed to a care facility. And this. The final document made Judge Harrison's eyebrows shoot up. A contract with Shady Oaks Memory Care, dated 1 week ago, reserving a room for Mrs. Hargrave and authorizing them to sedate her if she became agitated or uncooperative. Michael jumped to his feet. That's not what that means. We were just trying to be prepared. Prepared for what? Judge Harrison's voice could have frozen lava. To drug your mother into compliance? Sarah started crying. We didn't know about the money, I swear. We thought she was going to end up homeless, living with us, and we couldn't. You couldn't be bothered, I finished for her. You couldn't be bothered with an old woman who needed help, so you decided to warehouse me somewhere I'd be someone else's problem. Mrs. Hargrave, Judge Harrison said, do you wish to say anything else before I make my ruling? I looked at my children. Really looked at them. For what I knew would be the last time as their mother who loved them unconditionally. Your Honor, I'd like to tell you about a night 43 years ago. Michael was 6 years old and he had a terrible fever. Harold and I took turns sitting beside his bed, putting cool cloths on his forehead, giving him medicine every 4 hours. We didn't sleep for 3 days because we were so afraid we might lose him. Michael's face crumpled. Sarah broke her arm when she was 9, falling off her bike. I held her in my lap in the emergency room for 6 hours, singing her favorite lullabies, promising her everything would be okay. Sarah was sobbing now. I would have given my life for either of them at any moment without hesitation. That's what mothers do. I straightened my shoulders. But apparently that's not what children do. Judge Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. This petition is not only denied, it's dismissed with prejudice. Mrs. Hargrave is clearly competent to manage her own affairs. Her voice turned icy. Furthermore, I'm ordering an investigation into potential elder abuse and fraud. Mr. Peterson, your clients may want to retain criminal counsel. Michael and Sarah's lawyer was already packing his briefcase, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. As everyone filed out of the courtroom, Michael caught up with me in the hallway. Mom, please. We can fix this. We made a mistake, but we're family. No, I said quietly. Family doesn't abandon each other at airports. Family doesn't try to steal each other's freedom. Family doesn't drug each other into submission. We're sorry, Sarah whispered. We're so sorry. I looked at my daughter. My baby girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, who used to bring me dandelions she thought were the most beautiful flowers in the world. I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix this. That afternoon I was back in the Delta Sky Club, but this time as a guest of honor rather than an abandoned woman in a wheelchair. Janet brought me champagne and a plate of chocolate-covered strawberries. So what's next for you, Mrs. Hargrave? She asked. I thought about it. I think I'm going to travel. Harold and I always talked about seeing the world, but we never had the money. Well, how I do. Richard appeared beside my chair. The legal matters are all settled. Your assets are completely secure, and I've set up a management team to handle the day-to-day operations of your investments. And my children? They're facing fraud charges, but that's not your concern anymore. You're free to live your life however you choose. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Michael's contact information. Then I deleted it. There's too. Some people might think that was cruel. But cruelty was leaving your mother at an airport like a piece of unwanted luggage. Cruelty was trying to have her declared insane so you could steal her freedom. This was just justice. Janet, I said, I'd like to book a first-class ticket to somewhere I've never been. Where were you thinking? I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. Surprise me. 2 hours later, I was on a plane to Prague, sipping champagne and watching the clouds roll by beneath me. The flight attendant, a lovely young woman named Amy, kept checking to make sure I had everything I needed. Is this your first trip to Europe, Mrs. Hargrave? She asked. First trip anywhere, really. My husband and I, we always meant to travel, but life got in the way. Well, you picked a beautiful city to start with. Prague is magical. Magical. I liked the sound of that. As the plane soared through the night sky, I thought about Harold and all those stock certificates he'd hidden away like seeds, waiting for the right season to bloom. I thought about all the years I'd felt invisible, unnecessary, forgotten. I wasn't forgotten anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. Mrs. Hargrave, this is Carlos from JFK, the janitor who found you yesterday. Janet told me what happened. I just wanted you to know that sometimes angels come in the form of abandoned old ladies who teach us that nobody should ever be left behind. Enjoy your new life. I started crying then. Not from sadness but from something I couldn't quite name. Joy maybe. Or relief. Or the simple, overwhelming realization that I was finally, at 82 years old, exactly where I was supposed to be. 3 months later I was sitting in a cafe in Vienna when my phone rang. The number looked familiar but I couldn't place it. Mrs. Hargrave? This is Dr. Wells from Shady Oaks Memory Care. I almost hung up but something in her voice stopped me. I wanted to apologize, she continued. I had no idea what your children were really planning. When the investigation started, I realized I'd been manipulated into participating in something horrible. Why are you calling me? Because I wanted you to know that I've changed how we evaluate patients here. What almost happened to you should never happen to anyone. I thought about that for a moment. Dr. Wells, what would you say if I told you I was interested in funding a program to protect elderly people from exactly what my children tried to do to me? There was a long pause. I'd say that would be the most important thing anyone could do. And that's how the Hargrave Foundation was born. Now 2 years later I split my time between traveling the world and funding legal aid clinics for seniors facing abuse from their own families. I've seen the northern lights in Iceland and the cherry blossoms in Japan. I've had tea with strangers in Morocco and danced at a street festival in Brazil. I haven't spoken to Michael or Sarah since the courthouse. I hear they both got probation in community service. They lost their jobs, their houses, their friends. They lost everything really. Except the most important thing, they lost me. Yesterday I got a letter. No return address, but I recognized Michael's handwriting. Mom, I know you'll probably never forgive us, but I need you to know that not a day goes by that I don't regret what we did. We were scared and selfish and stupid, and we threw away the most precious thing we had. I hope wherever you are you're happy. You deserve to be happy. I read the letter twice, then put it in the box with all the others they've sent. Maybe someday I'll write back. Maybe someday I'll find a way to forgive them. But not today. Today I'm having lunch with the Queen of Denmark, who invited me after she heard about the foundation. Tonight I'm flying to New Zealand to see the place Harold always said looked like heaven. Tomorrow I'm living the life I never knew I deserved. And if there's one thing I've learned in all my travels, all my adventures, all my new beginnings, it's this. It's never too late to discover who you really are. Even if you're 84 years old and the people who were supposed to love you left you sitting next to a trash can at JFK Airport. Especially then. Because sometimes, getting abandoned is the first step toward finding yourself. And sometimes, the best revenge is living so well that you forget why you needed revenge in the first place.